Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and brutal chapters of ancient history, the world of Roman gladiators. You've probably seen them in movies like Gladiator or TV shows like Spartacus, but the real lives of these ancient warriors were even more intense, more disciplined, and surprisingly complex. So if you've ever wondered what it was really like to live, train, and fight as a gladiator in ancient Rome, keep watching. Who were the gladiators? Gladiators were combatants who entertained Roman audiences in bloody contests held in amphitheaters like the Colosseum. But contrary to popular belief, not all gladiators were slaves or forced into combat. While many were prisoners of war, criminals, or slaves, others were volunteers, free men who willingly entered the arena for fame, fortune, or a chance at glory. These men, and occasionally women, came from all walks of life. Some were former soldiers, others desperate citizens hoping to escape poverty. A few were even nobles who wanted to experience the thrill of combat and win the admiration of the public. The gladiator schools. Gladiators didn't just wake up and start fighting. They were trained rigorously in specialized schools called ludi, which were often run by wealthy managers known as lanistae. The most famous school was the Ludus Magnus, located just next to the Colosseum in Rome. Life in these schools was harsh and disciplined. Gladiators trained daily under the supervision of experienced instructors, many of whom were retired gladiators themselves. They practiced various fighting techniques, learned to use different weapons, and built up endurance and strength through physically exhausting routines. Despite their status, gladiators were valuable investments for their owners. They were fed high-energy diets consisting of barley, beans, and grains to keep them strong and muscular. Ancient sources even called them horderi, or barley men. They also received medical attention and lived in barracks within the training schools. Not luxurious, but better than the average Roman prison. The types of gladiators. Not all gladiators were the same. In fact, one of the most fascinating aspects of Roman gladiatorial games was the variety of gladiator types, each with their own weapons, armor, fighting styles, and strategies. These categories weren't random. They were designed to create balanced, dramatic, and visually exciting duels that would keep the audience on the edge of their seats. Let's take a closer look at some of the most iconic and well-documented gladiator types in ancient Rome. Murmillo. The Murmillo was a heavily armored gladiator who typically fought with a gladius, a short sword, and a large rectangular scutum, shield, similar to those used by Roman legionaries. He wore a distinctive helmet with a high crest, often shaped like a fish. The name Murmillo actually comes from the Greek word for a type of fish. Because of his weight and armor, the Murmillo relied on strength, endurance, and solid defense. He was often paired against lighter, faster opponents like the Thrax or Retiarius to create a contrast of power versus speed. Retiarius. One of the most unique and lightly armored gladiators, the Retiarius fought with a net, ret, trident, and dagger. He wore almost no armor, only a shoulder guard, gallerus, and sometimes a loincloth. His strategy was based on agility, mobility, and precision. The Retiarius would try to entangle his opponent with the net, and then strike with the trident. If the net missed or was lost, he had to rely on speed and the dagger. His common opponent was the secutor, a heavier gladiator designed specifically to counter his style. Secutor. The secutor, meaning chaser, was the natural rival of the Retiarius. He wore a smooth, rounded helmet with small eye holes, designed to avoid getting caught in a net. His armor was similar to the murmillo, with a large shield and a short sword. The secutor had to be quick and aggressive, closing the distance before the retiarius could ensnare him or strike from a distance. Their duels were among the most popular in the arena. Thrax, Thracian. The Thrax was inspired by Thracian warriors from the Balkans. He carried a curved short sword called a sika and a small rectangular or circular shield. His helmet had a wide brim and a high crest, often decorated with mythological creatures. Thrax gladiators wore protective armor on their legs, especially the shins, and were known for their nimble, tactical fighting style. They were often pitted against murmillos or hoplomachi. Hoplomachus. The hoplomachus resembled a Greek hoplite soldier carrying a spear and a small round shield. He also had a short sword for close combat and wore heavy armor on his legs and arms. He was matched against fighters like the murmillo or Thrax, creating battles that mimicked historical warfare, often seen as more elegant and strategic. Bestiarius. Unlike other gladiators who fought humans, the bestiarius fought wild animals such as lions, leopards, bears, or even crocodiles in special events called venationes. They had to be quick, fearless, and resourceful. Some wore minimal armor for agility, while others used spears or whips. This was one of the most dangerous roles, and survival depended not just on skill, but also on luck and showmanship. Gladiatrix, female gladiators. Yes, female gladiators existed, known as gladiatrices. While extremely rare, they did fight in arenas and were often used as a novelty to excite the crowd. Ancient inscriptions and artworks suggest that they were trained similarly to male gladiators and took part in real combat. Their existence challenges modern assumptions about the roles of women in Roman society and adds a fascinating layer to the history of the games. Each of these gladiator types contributed to the spectacle and drama of the Roman arena. Fights were carefully planned to be exciting and unpredictable. Pairing different classes was like creating a live-action game of chess, where each move could mean victory or death. The arena battles. For the ancient Romans, gladiator battles were more than just displays of brute force. They were public spectacles that combined violence, ritual, drama, and politics in a single breathtaking event. The heart of these battles was the arena, especially the Colosseum in Rome, a monumental amphitheater capable of holding more than 50,000 spectators. On the day of a gladiator match, the atmosphere inside the arena was electric. The crowd, from commoners to Roman elites, filled the stone seats, buzzing with anticipation. Trumpets sounded as a grand parade of gladiators, known as the Pompa, marched into the arena, their weapons gleaming under the sun, their faces steeled with focus. Often the fighters would salute the emperor, if he was present, with the legendary phrase, Ave, Imperator, morituri te salutant, meaning, Hail, Emperor, those who are about to die, salute you. Although not used in every battle, the phrase has become an iconic part of gladiatorial legend. As the combat began, the arena fell into a tense silence, broken only by the clash of swords, the roar of the crowd, and the rhythmic drumming of footsteps in the sand. Despite modern depictions, not every fight ended in death. Many bouts were fought to first blood, or until one gladiator was clearly overpowered and surrendered. Gladiators were valuable assets. They were expensive to train, and their owners wanted to protect that investment. Therefore, death matches were often reserved for special occasions, such as festivals or games paid for by the emperor to gain public favor. Still, the violence was real. Blades cut flesh, bones broke. The audience came for blood, and they usually got it. The matchups were carefully designed to excite the crowd. Gladiators of different types and fighting styles were often pitted against one another. A heavily armored murmillo with a broad sword might face off against a quick and agile thraex, who carried a curved blade and a small shield. The retiarius with his net and trident was commonly matched against a secutor whose smooth helmet was designed to protect him from being entangled. These matchups were not only thrilling to watch, but also tested the fighters' skills in adapting to unfamiliar combat styles. The duels were tactical, full of feints, dodges, and clever attacks, not just random brawling. The best fighters used their minds as much as their muscles. When one of the gladiators was clearly defeated, he might raise a finger to ask for mercy. At this moment, the crowd would erupt, voicing their opinion. Should the man be spared or executed? The editor of the games, often the emperor or a high-ranking official, would then make the final decision. While popular culture has simplified this moment into a thumbs-up or thumbs-down gesture, the actual signals used in Roman times are still debated by historians. Regardless, the moment was dramatic, as the fate of the beaten man hung in the balance, dependent on the whims of both the crowd and the editor. But gladiator battles were only one part of the day's entertainment. Between the fights, the arena hosted a variety of spectacles. Wild animal hunts, called venazione, brought lions, bears, elephants, and even crocodiles into the Colosseum. Hunters known as bestiarii fought these creatures to the delight of the audience. Sometimes the arena was even flooded to recreate naval battles, complete with ships and combatants reenacting famous sea skirmishes. Other times, executions were staged in brutal and symbolic ways, often forcing condemned criminals to fight unarmed or participate in theatrical scenes that ended in real death. All of these events served a larger purpose: to demonstrate Roman power, to celebrate imperial control over nature and enemies, and to keep the population entertained and loyal. Gladiators were central to that. Despite being slaves or prisoners in many cases, they were trained like elite athletes, coached by former warriors known as doctores. They learned how to fight, of course, but also how to perform, how to bleed with dignity, how to fall, how to win the crowd. In time, some gladiators became celebrities. Fans would carve their names into walls, cheer them from the stands, and even fall in love with them. Gladiators who won multiple battles could earn rewards, public admiration, and sometimes even their freedom, symbolized by a wooden sword called a rudis. While the violence of the arena may shock us today, to the Romans it was a vital expression of strength, discipline, and the spirit of the empire. The battles were brutal, yes, but they were also deeply human. Moments of courage, fear, honor, and survival played out on the sands of the most famous stage in the ancient world. Fame, fortune, and freedom. Despite the brutality and the harsh conditions they endured, some gladiators rose above their circumstances and achieved remarkable status within Roman society. Fame was one of the most surprising rewards awaiting successful gladiators. Though they were often slaves or prisoners of war, those who consistently won in the arena began to gain recognition not only among the common people, but also among Roman elites. Their names were chanted in the stands. Young fans carved their likenesses on walls and pottery. In cities across the empire, images of famous fighters were sold as graffiti, figurines, and even oil lamps. These men, once considered disposable, became cultural icons, living legends who inspired admiration, envy, and even love. This fame was not just symbolic. It could translate into real privileges. Gladiators who achieved several victories were given awards, including money, golden palm branches, and sometimes even property. Some were allowed to live in relative comfort within the gladiator schools, receiving better food, medical attention, and even gifts from admirers. Wealthy women were known to pursue romantic affairs with famous gladiators, seduced by their strength, mystery, and notoriety. Roman poets wrote of high-born ladies sneaking off in the night to visit their favorite fighter. These relationships, while controversial, added to the allure of the gladiator as a symbol of raw, forbidden masculinity. The ultimate prize, however, was freedom. A gladiator who proved himself in enough battles could be awarded a rudis, a small wooden sword that symbolized his release from duty and the granting of personal liberty. This was the dream for many: to survive long enough, fight well enough, and win the favor of the crowds and the editor of the games. Receiving a rudis was a rare honor, but it did happen, and when it did, it was celebrated with immense emotion. The newly freed gladiator could choose to retire, start a new life, or in some cases, continue fighting as a free man, now able to negotiate his own pay and terms. It's important to remember that despite their fame and possible wealth, gladiators still lived in constant danger. Their next match could always be their last. But for those who played the game wisely, not just with their weapons, but with their wits and their ability to perform, there was a small but powerful chance at transformation from slave to superstar, from property to person, from anonymity to immortality. And that's part of what made the gladiator myth endure. They weren't just fighters. They were symbols of resistance, resilience, and the possibility that even in the harshest system, greatness could rise. Their stories echo through time, not just because of the violence they survived, but because of the power, honor, and human spirit they carried into the sands of the arena. Life outside the arena. Despite their popularity, gladiators were not fully accepted into Roman society. They were considered infames, people with a shameful status, alongside actors and prostitutes. Even if they were beloved by fans, they lacked the legal and social standing of regular citizens. Outside the arena, their lives were restricted. Some lived in training schools year-round, while others had temporary housing in cities where games were held. Relationships were difficult. Although some had lovers or families, their uncertain future and constant risk of death made it hard to live a normal life. The end of the gladiator era. Gladiatorial games continued for centuries, but they eventually fell out of favor. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, public opinion began to shift. Christian leaders condemned the games as cruel and inhumane. The final recorded gladiator games were held in the early 5th century AD under Emperor Honorius, who officially banned them around 404 AD after a Christian monk named Telemachus attempted to stop a fight and was killed by the crowd. His death sparked outrage and helped bring an end to the gladiatorial tradition. Legacy of the Gladiators. Even though their time has long passed, the legacy of Roman gladiators lives on. They have inspired countless books, films, and cultural references. Today, we see them as symbols of strength, resilience, and the human fascination with bravery and survival. Their lives were filled with contradiction, Admired, yet shamed. Celebrated, yet enslaved. But one thing is certain. Gladiators left an indelible mark on history. So, now you know what life was really like for a Roman gladiator, from the rigorous training to the deadly combat, the fleeting fame, and the eventual fall of the games. Their stories are a reminder of both the brutality and complexity of the Roman world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient history, don't forget to like, subscribe to Lingoverse, and hit the bell for more content. And remember, this channel isn't just about history. It's also a great way to improve your English through exciting storytelling. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.